Hey everyone, I know it's been a little bit since we've done one of these shop updates. Landing gear here has been an ongoing project, so we'll talk about that. We've got some other things going on as well. We'll show you that, so let's just get right into it. Let's talk about the nose gear. Where are we at on all this? Well, we finished up with all the machine components, the basic hardware of the system. We got it all built up and mocked up right now. We've actually powered this thing and run it up and down. All we did there was just hook a battery up to the motor to drive it up and down. So at this point it works and we're happy about that, but it's not really intelligent at this point. So there's some more that we need to do with this to bring it to completion. And most of that centers around integrating the electrical system with the gear motor. There's a couple other little pieces of electrical hardware that we need to install, namely limit switches. So here's an example of one of them, or at least a test article that we're experimenting with. So the limit switches are going to be positioned so that the gear strut or piece of the gear contacts the limit switch when it's at the end of the travel. So that way our electrical system and the software knows when the gear is down or up. We've also installed an encoder in the motor that gives us position information on the motor so that not only do we know when the gear is up or down, but we also know where it is in transit. That way we can slow it down or speed it up so that, say, it doesn't crash into the ends of its travel. So there's a lot going on with all this. We'll do a full dedicated video talking about the full functionality of this and the electrical system and logic. But you have to be patient on that. So again, bringing it to completion, River's doing a lot of work with the electrical system to get the electrical system installed in the fuselage and integrated with this. Let's see where River's at with all that.
Hey everyone, there's a lot of miscellaneous tasks that go into installing the electrical system in the aircraft. And one of those tasks that I've been working on lately is installing hardpoints in order to secure the center tunnel avionics box in the airframe. To kind of talk you through what those hard points look like, I've got a diagram here showing a cross section of what our baggage floor looks like, and this is the floor that the center tunnel avionics box sits on. I've got a section of honeycomb panel here, and as you can see, the center is filled up with our honeycomb material. This material isn't ideal for threading bolts through because if you apply too much pressure, it can crush locally. So that's where these hard points come in, and this is a phenolic disc. To install the phenolic disc, you can see that we need to install a cavity inside the panel for the phenolic disc to go into, and then we tie up the material with carbon fiber on the top. In this case, we don't need to add material on the bottom since we aren't going all the way through. Once these hard points are installed in the panel, we have something that we can drill into in order to thread a bolt through the baggage floor and into the underside of our box where we'll be installing clip-on fasteners that the bolt secures into. Why don't we head over to the airframe and I can show you some of the prep work I have already in place before installing the phenolic disc. So here we are in the airframe. As you can see, we've got our center tunnel, and this is where the center tunnel avionics box will go. You can see that I've already created the cavities for 2 hard points, and you'll notice that these are positioned directly above the nose gear wheel well. And the idea is that when the nose gear is fully extended and the plane's on the ground, you can come up in here with the bolt through the wheel well and into the box. I've got my phenolic disc here. So the next steps I'll have to do will be to take this phenolic disc. We'll be adding E120 into each of these cavities. We nest the phenolic disc like that so that it sits flush with the baggage floor surface. And then we'll also be adding this carbon plate to the top, bonding that in place. And then we'll have a hard point that we can drill through that will provide a space for our bolts to go into the center tunnel box. So with that said, I'm gonna move on to installing these.
So while we're getting the electrical system installed, I've been working on the main gear. We've shown a little bit of the main gear in the past. I'll put a link to a video up above if you want to check that out and get up to speed on the architecture for the main gear. So what we've done so far, we've made a couple of the components. We've machined out the trailing links. They look like that. and the shock bottom brackets. And then we've also molded up the halves for the composite gear struts or the gear legs. I don't think we've talked about these a lot in the past, but the gear legs are made out of carbon fiber and they're in two halves like this. And then they get joined together with some strips of carbon fiber that sit on both the inside and outside of these halves. Basically, it forms lap joints that tie these halves together. Also, we need to install the ends of these legs or on the ends of these struts. So this is just a 3D printed mock-up of the bottom end of the strut. So the way this works, it'll get attached to the end of the strut, and then it allows the trailing link to pivot on the end of the gear strut like this. So while that's going on in parallel, I've been doing some CAD work to finalize the retract mechanism for the main gear. We had a design, but after building up the new nose gear retract mechanism, we learned some things that we really like, and we want to take those lessons learned and incorporate them into the main gear retract mechanism and make it better. So there are a bunch of machine components that are going to be required to make that happen. Keegan's going to have to machine those, but I'm not done with the CAD work yet. So in the meantime, he's been working on other stuff. Let's go take a look at what he's got going on.
Normally I'm tied up over at the CNC mill. We don't have any components that we're making right now. Riley's queuing up a few components to make for the main gear. So in the meantime, I'm working on the fuel system, and I have some of those components laid out in front of me. Probably the coolest looking one in the whole fuel system itself is the central sump. So it's a carbon fiber component. There's a top half and a bottom half, and a lot goes on with this sump. And I'll describe a little bit of what we have going on here. So we have a left wing and a right wing. Both of those two wings hold fuel. It's a wet wing, and that's gravity fed down to our central sump. So this sits in between the left wing and the right wing. So we have our lines right here. So left wing, right wing, that's where our fuel flows in. And then on the top of the sump here, we have two little elbows that vents fuel vapors out to the tips of the wings back into the tanks. On the side of the sump, we have our supply line and our return line. So our supply line runs fuel to our pump, and then from our pump to the engine. And then whatever fuel the engine doesn't use, it comes back to the return line. And then on the back side here, there's one more line, and that runs to our drain valve. So we have a lot of the lines already built up. For example, this is our supply line. It's all finished up. All the angles are bent into the line here, and it fits up just nice. I have to still do the return line. And in order to do the return line, we have to have the wing installed in the plane or into the fuselage with our sump installed. And we want to make sure we get all the distances and the angles just right for our tubing. So we're going to be doing that next, and I'm going to be doing these return lines for the fuel system.
All right, everyone, that's all we have for this video. If you have any questions or comments about anything you saw, leave it in the comments below. We'll try to get back to you. Otherwise, we'll catch you next time.
And I'll show you what that looks like in another video. No, I won't. Probably not.